technical problems today? Here we go. Welcome to the January 28th, 2019 meeting in the Yarmouth Board of Health. And the first item is to my right. So we have a new member, and that's Eric Weston, and it's nice. So we're up. We have a full board again. And welcome.
Thank you.
Excited about having you here.
Excited to be here.
Okay. So let's move on to the public comment. If someone is here would like to address the board about an issue, please do so. Okay, I think we're moving along. Second item, agenda is discussion town housing rental program. And it's listed under that as 1976 town rental bylaw, Airbnb, new state bylaw, which has to do with short-term rentals, and housing staff requests. Mr. Murphy, can you tell us what's up here?
Yes, I'd like to just give you, the board, an overview of the housing program within the health department. We have our housing inspector, Kevin Hook, that will come to the front table. That can go over how the program operates. You can see that we've had it since 1976, about 42 years. People that rent their house have to be registered with the Board of Health, which they have. We have one inspector to handle about 2,800 rental complaints and units and complaints and association. We can't really we can barely keep up with it. Barnstable has just over 3,000. They have 2 inspectors. So as we look forward to, as you'll hear the program unfold and how it's going to unfold in the next, couple months, we just wanted to give the board an update on the housing program, and as you read in the paper, some of the income that will be coming in, due to the Airbnb short-term tax rentals.
Great.
So with that, we have our housing inspector, Kevin Hook.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Director, Chair, board members, public. My name is Kevin Hook. I'm the housing inspector here for the town of Yarmouth. I've been in the position for 2.5 years. Before I get into the information, I'd just like to give you a little of my background. I've been here the 2.5 years and never formally met the board or our town members, so I just want to give a little background. Prior to my 2.5 years here, I worked for the federal government, and during that time I was in the first responder fire department, and I held the position of captain and fire prevention inspector. And the Department of Defense has a pro board accreditation program. I reached the level of fire chief. Although I never held the position, I followed my heart and stayed in fire prevention and continued to do plans review and public education, and until I finally retired from fire service. So I retired out of fire service 18 years. I also am a Coast Guard retiree, 24 years. I spent most of my time here on Cape Cod, fortunately. So that's a little bit on my background.
Where were you stationed on Cape Cod?
I spent 9 years at the surf station in Chatham, Woods Hole. Spent several years in Woods Hole, and so.
And now we have you.
And now I'm here.
Okay.
So, as the director opened up with some of the comments, the town bylaw has worked pretty well. I don't believe that needs to be revised. That was written in 1976, and it was also amended in 1988. And that basically states that every homeowner that does have a rental needs to register that either with the form, the registration form, mail-in, or that can be completed by going to the Town of Yarmouth website. After completing that registration form, the member has to set up an inspection of the property to see that it complies with the state housing and sanitation regulations. There is approximately 2,700 registered rentals in the town of Yarmouth. It has become quite daunting trying to get the registered rentals inspected. We have a master list that we follow, and we've called the owners to try and set up scheduled inspections by follow-up phone calls, messaging, letters. The letters are first, second, and finals, and we've actually had to send out violation letters for those who do not comply. And that is part of the town bylaw. The health office does receive several complaints. We take in 20 to 25 complaints weekly with follow-ups. The complaints we do receive are housing related. Many of them are housing related. In 2018, we received 1,164 complaints. These complaints vary from no heat, trash buildup, rats and rodent, mold, overcrowded units, septic problems, and again, non-registered rentals. Many of the non-registered rentals are called in by our first responders that go to these units, police departments, neighbors again, complaints, and then we follow up with our letters. I've been summoned to court while I've been in this position approximately 5 times.
What were they for?
Renters and over disputes, property that have been beat up.
Tenant landlord issues.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This position requires me to go into some of our larger facilities, Swan Pond Village, Davenport Properties, Mill Hill, Mayflower Residence, Simpkin Schools, the Cavalier units that they're building on 28 that are pending. We work closely with the staff of our local housing authorities, Housing Assistance Corps of Cape Cod, Barnstable, Dennis, Sandwich Housing Authorities, along with some off Cape as well. These occupants can use their vouchers wherever they choose to live. That's why we have so many coming in from off Cape.
That's a good, yeah, that's a good point, Kevin, just to.
They also have to meet the Housing Authority guidelines.
I'm not clear what you're saying. I'm not understanding this.
They may not have to meet our standards here in the town, but they have to meet the Housing Authority guidelines. It may be state, it may be federal, depends on that voucher that was given.
So,
I don't understand the vouchers, I guess that's it.
so the people that, based on their financial economics,
Section 8?
Section 8 housing
Okay,
are
I
eligible for housing assistance.
Okay,
They can get a voucher, and they can go for anywhere in the state. So a lot of them will say, well, I think I'll try my voucher on the Cape. Let's look at Yarmouth. They have some units right there. It's a nice town to reside in, so they'll come here. So we work with a lot of Kevin will work with a lot of other towns when they call and say, we're looking at, bringing in a person. We want to make sure that the house is registered and been inspected. Not all the housing authorities inspect their house their first time, so they rely on us. Hopefully they have the property registered with us. So I'd say so you get calls from various parts of the state, but very often we're working with, as Kevin said, Barnstable, Dennis, and Sandwich seems to be sending people this way. That about cover it that right a little bit?
And again, to emphasize, all rentals in town need to be registered with us,
Right.
even the authorities.
Yeah.
The new Airbnb short-term tax bill, that state bill applies to short-term more than 14 days and less than 31. That is our interpretation. And that will require the owners to pay the tax,
To the state, strictly
the state.
to the state.
The additional rental units will only burden this position and the housing program. Our stats presently show and will require an additional housing inspector for additional housing inspections and for safety. The stats that I've shown you on the 2,700 registered units, we're only accomplishing half of our inspections. I must say, I am only, because I am the only one that accomplished this. That's one housing inspector, one division assistant, both full-time, fully self-funded through the money that's taken in from this program
Right now.
right now.
Yeah, okay.
How long does an inspection take for you normally?
20 minutes to a half hour.
You want to just tell them some of the things that you look for during an inspection? Or the people at home that will be looking here that will be calling you tomorrow?
The state sanitary and housing code basically encompasses the health and safety items in the home: carpets, countertops, bathroom, flooring, tub, showers, sanitary items throughout the house, to include the exterior of the house, yards. So,
You want to explain how you set an occupancy rate? The number of people that can live in the unit?
the occupancy is based on the septic system that's installed in the house, the number of bedrooms that the house has, and the size of the bedroom. Presently, I have an electronic scanner that I scan the bedrooms when I go in, which has really saved a lot of time. And that calculation gives the final occupancy number for the house. So the couches, day beds, air mattresses, that does not meet the guidelines. Strictly bedrooms.
And size of bedrooms? Approximately
The
1-2 people.
bedrooms have to be 70 square feet to be qualified to be a bedroom. 10 by 10, 100 square or greater is a two-person occupancy. Less than a 10 by 10, 100 square is a one-person occupancy.
So what happens? You make an inspection and you find there's a problem. What happens next?
Depending on the severity of the items found, I set up a follow-up inspection with the owner, and I go back out based on the amount of time he needs to take care of the items that were noted. If the items are minor, then the permit is issued as long as the registration has been submitted with the cost of that, which is either $70, which is a charge for the mail-in, or for the online, or $80 for the mail-in.
The final notices that you send, they are accompanied by a $200 fine, is that correct?
The town bylaw states that I can give a $200 a day fine. If I'm answering your question right, I typically do not give that $200 fine for the first letter that goes out. So again, we've actually given 2 to 3 phone calls with left messages, and then there's a first, second, and final. So each time we send a letter is one violation.
So the final violation is $600 then?
We bring it back. We roll it back. It hasn't been a $200 fine.
So what incentivizes the people to go ahead and finally follow up and get in touch with you and schedule an inspection? And do they? I mean, does the final notice mean anything to them?
I've only gone to court twice for this offense since I've been in this position in 2.5 years, and no one has ever had to pay the fine.
So people
Because
are responding to the final?
We've actually resolved the issue.
So another question, the 1,200 that are currently inspected, does that mean last year you inspected 1,200, or that in their history there have been 1,200 inspections?
I'm not trying to dance your question. The way that I've set it up is if we don't actually have a scheduled how the frequency of our inspections, that's why the baseline inspection is so important to us. We don't have baselines on a lot of our properties, so therefore we want to know what's in our community. So depending on that baseline inspection will give us that frequency on how often we need to go back to that property. And we quite often have owners asking us, how often do you inspect? And so again, there's no frequency scheduled. It's based on that baseline.
The backup that you have, how do you approach that? Do you take the oldest registrations first and work on them, or the ones that you know are still current, or?
The backup, I'm sorry.
Well, you have 1,200, but there were 2,700, 2,800 actual rentals.
Right.
So how are you working at that bunch of rentals that haven't been inspected at all? How do you approach that?
We have a program that's challenging, electronic program that's challenging. So we've come a long way in a couple years, and we've got a fantastic administrative assistant now who's all over this. So we're able to track it with a master list. So it's gotten much better in the last 2 years.
So I would say, just to help out, not help out, just to put a point of light, we have Christine, that's our board member. She's also the housing secretary, so that's been very helpful, and she came on board this fall. So that's helped us. We didn't have anybody doing a lot of the paperwork then, so that's really helped. So when an application comes in, Christine will be looking at it. It either comes in the mail or online, and then she'll check to see if Kevin's been out there in the last couple of years.
Okay.
And if he's been out there in the last couple of years and the baseline is fine, they can just proceed with issuing a permit. If it's one that they looked at that they've had some issues before, then they would schedule an inspection. Or if the application came in and it says right up on top to inspection of all units are required to call, if they haven't, she'll call them. She'll try to make an appointment and saying, we received your application, you haven't called us to schedule an appointment yet, and so Christine is constantly making phone calls for inspections. So she has a work log in front of her, a daily work log, and Kevin's divided the town up, so they just keep trying to do inspections.
We've had a 3-year rotation in the past. I just wanted to be clear that I didn't want our homeowners to think that it was going to be a 3-year rotation. So I just wanted to be clear on that baseline, what that was all about. And
Right.
it's worked well. And we document these inspections very well. So we're having a real good idea of what's out in our community.
What happens to the owner who's renting and hasn't registered? Maybe last year or was never registered. What happens to that person, the owner of the property?
Well, that individual that you're describing has fallen into our first, second, and final. And we, right now, are waiting on one who is going to be summoned to court. I have actually been to court for this owner, and he did not show up to court. So I'm sure he's going to be getting a subpoena. But there has not been just the one case that we've gone that far.
You're certainly welcome to have someone come in front of the board if someone is not scheduling an inspection or they're not paying for violations. You certainly could have them come in front of us.
I certainly appreciate that. We have brought in some of our owners to administrative boards with the director and myself, and also the building commissioner. It's worked out very well.
Okay, let me know.
And
I can
work-
join you in a meeting. If that-
And we did have a landlord come before the board that we were having difficulties in maintaining their properties, her properties, and we did bring that landlord before us, and that's helped. So,
It's an educational process, and it has worked out well, working with owners, and I think once they know what's expected, what the minimum standards are, it's not too difficult to meet the minimum standards for the state. So that's all we're trying. We're trying to make it a better home for our renters.
right, and safety, we're looking for safety to make sure that the renters aren't, in an attic or in a basement, over a garage, in places that don't meet building or health code regulations. So that's one thing. And a lot of the people do register every year. They know they need to register, so that's, and then the ones that don't, that we pick up, as Kevin said, through complaints or something else, we tell them you have to register, and they all register. And the thing is, we have to make sure they register the following year. So it's constant, trying to see if people register or not. If they don't, as Kevin said, they could be subject. We start with a $50 fine if they don't register. So it's worked out well, but it's constant with one person trying to keep track of 2,800 units plus doing all the inspections, but then trying to get in complaints in the meantime that
Right.
he'll have a full day schedules of inspections, and I'll mention, are you able to get to these 3 or 4 complaints during the day? Gee, you got a trash complaint here, and you got to go check on some rat burrows somewhere else, and somebody just called, they don't have any hot water this morning. So there's a lot of things that keep Kevin constantly in motion.
The housing-related complaints, how many of those occur in rentals that have not registered? What percentage would you say are in rentals that were not registered with the town? Just ballpark. I mean, you're talking half or 3/4 or 10%? I mean, is this the first time you're hearing about many of them?
Well, I'm sorry, most of the complaints come in from renters, because usually it's a homeowner not going to call themselves.
You already know about the rental.
Yeah.
Sometimes,
But we're not
yes.
sure that they have a problem, yeah.
We've got a lot of complaints through our public,
Right.
members that see excessive traffic going to a particular house, noise, some of these items that I mentioned, and we actually look it up and we find that they're not registered.
Right. That's what I'm
So
asking.
we do pick up a lot that way.
So my next question is, what can we do to support your getting an additional inspector?
Yeah, that's, well, I'll jump in, thanks, Kevin, a little bit.
With the new tax, the numbers are going to...
With the new tax, that's-
Make money, yeah.
Yeah, that will definitely support the housing program. I have brought this up during the budget cycle as submitting my information to the town administration and put in that this should be something that we need to look at in the budget. And we couldn't do it for this year because when we started in October, the governor hasn't signed anything. So the idea is we'd be looking at the next budget
Right.
season. I had mentioned if there's any funding or availability of money in the meantime, could we do something in the meantime? Would be helpful. We did put in, I was able to put in a summer housing inspector intern that could work with Kevin, either assisting Christine making follow-up calls or also going out and looking at complaints and doing follow-up inspections, which really helps.
That person could do an official inspection? not?
Depending how the training goes, yes, it's possible. We've done it in the past. I've had summer inspectors, so that's tentatively in the budget right now. Or they're still going through the budget cycle, so hopefully that will stick. We're not quite sure, and then I guess we just need to see how the town's going to go forward with what percent they're going to ask for and try to look for projections.
Well, you certainly need help.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody have any questions? Once, twice, that's it. Thank you.
Thank
It
you
was really very
very
Thank you.
informative.
Good work.
Welcome, Mr. Weston.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we're down to number 3 on the agenda, and that's an update on the food service grading. We have a spreadsheet on statistics covering 2016 through the 2018. Director Murphy, any comments?
Yes, this was put together by the food service inspector, Phil Renault, that works for us, that was unable to attend tonight's meeting. He has a second job and wasn't able to make it tonight, so I said I'd cover for him. So what we tried to do is, Phil looked at since we looked at, the board looked at the food grading from 16 to 17 to 18, in the categories of issuing A, B, and C for the restaurant establishments. It looks like, and from what we can see, the number of restaurants have increased. The A's have increased, which we figured that they would be striving a little bit more for the A's. B's are still fine. We try not to discourage that a B is a bad thing, because sometimes it's just a point here or there that makes a difference. So B's have decreased a little bit, so because they have moved up to A's. And then the C's, that were the ones that were probably inspecting a little bit more often, have even increased. Decreased, right.
Down to 1%.
They've increased the B's and
Yeah.
decreased that, so that's
Great.
very good. So, and the regulation does require reinspection. So if you got a C or a B, you could, after a week, ask for a reinspection, and some did, and some stayed with a B, and which was fine. So we have seen an overall improvement in the restaurant establishments, which we thought they would. They're paying, I think, a little bit more attention to it. I think they always paid attention, but now that they're looking for a grade, I think that's focusing a little bit more. So I think that's good. You have the on that same sheet of the stats, it's 5 points if it was a critical inspection, and 2 points if it was just a normal inspection. Some of the top critical 5-point deductions that would be seen and taken off the ratings if there was bare hand contact in the kitchen, they weren't using gloves, raw meat that might be just stored over other meat that was in the walk-in or refrigerator that wasn't stored properly, hand wash stations not having soap or paper towels, and refrigeration out of the proper zones and not having a thermometer. So they were the main things that you would get a 5-point deduction on. And then the non-critical, the 2 points would be if they weren't keeping the floors, walls, ceiling clean, the grill line equipment, the walls and the grills and the fryer laters, keeping those clean, if painting was needed, storage area, the boxes and things not off the floor and so forth. So it was good. I think we have a very good group of restaurant associations and restaurant people, that owners that work here, and they take their keeping their establishments clean very close. Very happy for that. We have a good relationship with them, and I think they do a great job doing that. They work hard at it. So we're happy with that. And I think that will lead me right into the second item on the agenda of the new food code that came out at the end of October. that you have on the second sheet that is changing a little bit. They're calling some of the critical violations now, or instead of critical, going to be called priority. So we're thinking of just changing the score from was critical 5 points to priority 5 points, just calling it all the same. They kind of have a middle one. We're not sure would go added as a 3-point. We're trying to match up the scores right now. We're talking to a couple other towns what they're going to do. Barnstable does a restaurant scoring, so we've been talking to them. Matter of fact, we met with them last week. We had a meeting on the new food code itself. So we have the highlights here. We'll be putting this new food code information in the restaurant licenses that they'll be receiving this month, just giving them the highlight and giving them the link if they want to go and look online at the code itself. But some of the major changes, and I don't have to go through all of it, but just I want to let you know and the people at home, is they're looking at the potentially hazardous foods. They're calling it time temperature now. There's been some name changes. Some of the stores that we license, the smaller retail stores, if they're only selling packaged items, might not need a retail food permit now. So, we have maybe a couple of the gas stations. We have a couple little candy markets that they might not. We're still going to decide that. If they have any milk or anything like that, or a dated product, they would still have to have a permit with us, because that's one of the things we check for when we do our inspections. They're all
That would include then the farmer's market, right?
correct. Yes, farmers market would continue having a license from us, though.
Even though they're just selling uncut fresh fruits and vegetables and...
Well, the way right now we don't charge for the fruits and vegetables, but the other items we have at the farmers market, we have rolls, we have bread.
Right, but I mean,
we have
what if
nuts.
the vendor just has fresh fruits and vegetables?
That's fine. We don't charge them now. Let's see. Bed and breakfasts, we can consider not issuing a license. I would probably recommend that we still do, because they are still serving food even though it's owned to their own guests. So we want to make sure the refrigeration is correct and the washing and everything, and hand sanitation and so forth. So the way the state said this is they kind of rolled it out in October without a lot of education to the restaurant associations or to the general public. So what they've said is, try to work with your restaurant people as you roll it out over the, next several months. Also, new duties of the person in charge, called a pick, is making sure deliveries are properly, done. So if it's an early morning delivery, don't leave, stuff just sitting outside. Making sure their employees that work there do not have coughs, colds, or any types of symptoms they shouldn't be working. They need to be making more responsible in watching that area. And that would also include the food service safety manager, besides the person in charge at all times. And then we just kind of put a few tips on food safety, because we had some more room on the application. It's always good to repeat the education to everybody of checking their temperatures, the thermometers, make sure they're thawing foods, using ice baths or shallow pans, and then the walk-in, just not leaving food on the counter, checking your dishwasher temperatures, checking your wiping cloths, keeping your cold foods cold and hot foods hot. So it's just kind of letting them know what to look for. So one of the new things is in the new food code is the food establishment has to post a sign that tells customers that a copy of the last town food service inspection is available upon request. So if somebody goes into a restaurant and says, I'd like to see your inspection, they have to bring it out. We're hoping the people with all the A's and even the B's would have it posted right there so you can see it without getting online at town, but that is a new requirement of the new food code. So we're thinking our restaurants are on a good way going forward, and we look forward to continue working and educating with them.
So how are you going to communicate with the bed and breakfast folks about the fact that you want to keep them in the queue for licensing and inspections? Even if they find out that the state says it may not be required, but we're going to continue to require?
I think we would just say I've brought it to the board, and a consensus, I'd be asking for the board for a consensus tonight, at least for the bed and breakfast, that we continue issuing them a food service license.
I would certainly support
I
that.
support that,
All right, so
very much so. Yeah.
that's what I would tell them. That's consensus? Everybody's nodding yes, okay.
Great.
So, and-
Bruce, this is fabulous.
Yeah.
Ordinarily, you got to go through this 3-inch code for the restaurant owners.
Yeah.
It's great that Phil
It's
put this
great.
together.
And for the people back home, we should tell them that we have 143 food service establishments in town that we're keeping track of. It's not quite the 2,800 that
Right.
Kevin's keeping track of, but we're keeping the food service establishments. A lot of them have been being visited at least twice during the season, sometimes 3 times, depending if they need another inspection or not. So, I mean, that's a lot. We didn't break it down. We had in the past, out of the 143, how many are seasonal and so forth, but it's 143 that we have to maintain. And that's also the paperwork when it comes in to make sure they submit their food service safety certificates, their Heimlich certificates, the anti-choking certificates, the allergen certificates. We have to look at the menus when they go out to make sure they have the menus correct, that, uncooked products need to be listed. So it's a lot to keep track of the food safety program.
Are the establishments notified prior to the inspections?
That's a great question. The answer is, in general, no. It's a spot inspection. Phil will just kind of get an idea of when they've been through to try to spread it out during the season. The only ones that have a somewhat of an idea we're coming is in December, where we have to do liquor license inspections to make sure that they're in compliance with the town, the building and fire and health safety. So they'll know that we'll be there sometime from middle of November to the end of December, but they're not sure of what day, so there's no call inspection. Any new place coming in will have a inspection, and they need to open at a 100 score
Before they open?
before they open. So they'll know. So they'll work with us. We'll sit down with them. We'll give them the sheet. We'll go over. A lot of them are familiar with from running a restaurant what is needed. So we'll do an inspection, and if they're still missing something, we will make sure that they have that before they open. And there's not a lot of turnover. There's a little turnover in restaurants. The smaller restaurants will turn over, and some of the big ones have turned over with somebody else taking over, and we'll start over, going through it with them.
Any questions? Thanks, Bruce. Okay. 5th item on the agenda is protect our Cape Cod aquifer, specifically on banning herbicides on town property, Roundup or similar products with glyphosate. What's the latest, Director Murphy, on this?
Okay. I've given the board several documents for their packet. I think we've had a few passed on to me from the chairman for general discussion. This was on our last board meeting, and the board wanted to just hear a little bit more from all the town departments before the board made a vote. You have the survey of all the various departments in town that was requested by the town administrator. So you have an update on that, which shows that the town uses very little Roundup in use for any of the departments, and that would be DPW, golf, conservation, and so forth, natural resources on the trails. And what was used in such small quantities was usually used by a licensed pesticider on what I would call direct discharge. A lot of it, like on the Phragmites, is a cut and spray, and it would just be used right in that area. It's not sprayed by backpacks off a truck or things like that. It's right in a particular area. So you have some information, and from all the departments, we tried to, Kyle in the office, kind of put everything together from the departments and the date they responded that you have for you on that. Also included 2 things in there. One was an update from the Kelly Grant, the Conservation Administrator. She wrote a letter to the Board of Selectmen last week, January 22nd, that outlines conservation's management and how they look at what is needed for what they see as management of Phragmites along the wetlands, if it has to be controlled, if it's affecting any town property. And again, she explains in great detail about the specific ways they handle it by a licensed applicator and direct source. The request was also brought to Conservation Commission themselves. They did look at it. They had Kelly's letter and the Conservation's vote that you have in here also, that they voted to ban the Roundup. However, there's been more discussion with the Conservation because they have a contract with a couple contracts with landscapers to apply it to Phragmites, so that would kind of make it difficult for them. One thing that the Conservation Commission had put into a draft recommendation to the selectmen was that the Board of Health could issue emergency conditions if we wish to use Roundup. And I had talked to her back and forth and said that might be different on Phragmites, which is slow growing, and what would be the public health impact of Phragmites that you've had time to use other alternative methods.
The invasion, the emergency.
The invasion. So Conservation's going to put it on their agenda to discuss it again. There was some questions that came up of, would it be, if it's not a public health agenda, how would they control it? And they do have their contracts that we would probably null and void. So you have that. And then we just also received from an update from available that I made to the board was from Health Canada, that just came out with a statement on glyphosate, that they did not round up, that they did not feel that there was any issue to humans on the current use levels that was done. And that just came out, which is probably similar to OSHA, EPA.
And who sent that to you?
That was brought to my attention by a representative of the pesticide company.
Right.
But since then, I have heard from a couple other towns that they were aware of it before that. So I guess it just hadn't reached my desk yet.
I looked into some of the work that was done up in Canada, and a lot of the studies are pretty old. A lot of it was like 3 decades old, in the sense of the papers that were published, and a lot of them were financed by Monsanto, actually. And there was a term they used to joke about, it was the Monsanto papers. So it's similar to tobacco in some ways. It is. This goes back to the 60s, 1960s, of course. But
We're buzzing.
we're buzzing. I see that. Flies on TV. All right.
I have a question. I don't know who Thomas Durkin is.
Conservation member. Board member.
Conservation board member, okay. And then just a comment about the Canadian paper, and also the comments, I guess somewhere else here. They're just talking about human effects. Gosh, I showered. And not environmental effects, which I think is now where the committee for the POCA is kind of aiming at. They seem to have kind of fallen back a little bit on the human health effects, and they're looking at the environmental effects. I don't understand what an emergency would be. I mean, I don't like Phragmites, but I can't imagine that ever pose an emergency for me. I mean, that connotes something urgent that needs immediate action, and that's a real threat.
And that's kind of what I mentioned, the conservation administrator, that she needs to talk to her commission, that I wouldn't see an emergency to bring here, and what would that public health threat be? That
A public health issue, yes, but, that we're concerned about the public health, which includes the environment. if we're going to say that right now this chemical is not proven to cause human cancer.
And could they use something else in the meantime? I mean, the other question is that. Pardon?
Oh, yes, oh,
No.
no, we have.
We have.
Oh,
We've talked
we
about
brought the
those a
woman
lot.
in. I invited her in, and she
Right.
came in to talk about it.
She brought her
to rent the
goats.
goats. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
she did.
We
Was
had
that-
her here a number of years ago.
I
Yeah.
was going to say, I wasn't on the board.
You weren't. You missed the
The
goats.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, it just
Stick
grows.
around,
it-
they'll be back.
Yeah, they'll be back. It grows back. So that was the tougher part.
I was impressed that, that we did hear from everyone finally,
Yes.
that people, I think, seem to be treating this chemical with respect, that it's only, it's not being applied by town employees, it's only being applied by people who are licensed.
Correct.
Town employees can't apply it.
We might
and
have
it's
somebody in
being
the,
very
we might have
selectively used.
somebody in the golf might apply it because they're certified.
Right, okay, but they're certified.
Yes, certified.
It comes down to benefit versus risk here, I think. And I think that's what the board needs to talk about a little bit. What are the benefits? Anyone want to answer? Why do we want to be using the product?
Well, we're talking about, first off, the economy of the town in terms of tourism, and they're talking about some of the properties that they use it on because of the overgrowth of poison ivy and phragmites, and what was the third one? But bittersweet. I mean, those things encroach upon paths and properties, and they, they can make visitors not want to visit and walk in the area. They can also occlude the view. So there's that piece of it. There's also, with the Phragmites, it's taking over some of our natural marshes. So that's not a good thing, because the wetlands are very important to us in our environment and our health. Those are two things I can
Yeah.
think of anyway.
The selectmen have moved their meeting that they're going to rediscuss it again to March 5th, I believe that is, that Tuesday. So, the board can consider it a little bit more. I know I've given a lot of data tonight, discussion, or you can discuss which way you might wish to go tonight.
If the reading I come across, looking at conclusions on papers, you get opinion, it's unlikely, it's probable, in a sense of how carcinogenic these chemicals are. So I'm struggling with this one a lot. A lot of the studies, when I looked into it, it's not just the chemical by itself. It has sometimes to do what it's binding with in the product. And that's unknown because these are trade secrets. Why do, Rodeo doesn't want to tell Roundup what they're using to make their product better. So a lot of the things I've read, it was concerned with that, not just the pure chemical, which is often what's tested in labs and not an entire product. So that bothered me. The EPA is renowned for giving these tolerable or okay levels of toxic things, and that's not based upon science very often.
I don't trust that anymore.
Right. They'll tell you how much mercury is safe to have in your body. How do we know that? So this is difficult. And you mentioned some of the positive things, results of using it, for sure. It's these products are non-selective. They kill whatever they're put on or whatever's around it. It's not just focused on one type of weed. Is that right? What do you know?
Yeah, that's correct.
But if you're talking about a point application, then you are doing it selectively. You're not broadcast spraying and you're not doing aerial spraying. I guess, I've said before, I don't like any pesticides, but I think right now there's probably a need for these products to be used very judiciously. I would recommend that all of these folks look into the alternatives, because we did talk about that. There might be alternatives, they might be costly, they might be labor-intensive, but I don't know what they are. I don't know if they know what they are, but it'd be interesting to know just what are the alternatives to this.
There are more selective alternatives. For example, things that kill woody vines like bittersweet and poison ivy can form secondary growth, but it won't kill grasses, whereas glyphosate will kill grass and
Everything, yeah.
woody vines. So
And the goat. Goats eat all those things.
That's what I said.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, at some point, the board's going to need to vote on this as a recommendation of, what to do about it. And it'll come out as a vote, whatever the score is, as basically a recommendation to the selectmen. What's the opinion of this board? That's something we can do tonight, or we can do it at the next meeting. It's in March when selectmen are taking this up?
Correct.
5th.
People have any feelings whether they want to vote on it tonight or wait to our next meeting, which to me it doesn't make any difference.
I'm kind of with Mary on this one.
Yeah, and based on what you just said, I'd be happy to say that the glyphosate can only be used on Phragmites, and that they have to use other things on bittersweet and poison ivy because they are available. But I'd also like to see them look into if there's anything else that can be done with the Phragmites, although, as I've said before, I doubt that there is.
At some point, it's going to have to be a vote. You can use it or you can't use it, I think, is the bottom line, is what the selectmen are certainly going to want, and understandably so.
I don't understand why. Why couldn't we say just Phragmites? That's the only thing that, the glyphosate is the only chemical that will rid us of the Phragmites when it has to be done. I mean, I don't see why we couldn't say that. It doesn't have to be all or nothing.
I think that's the only chemical that will treat Phragmites.
Right.
So, I mean,
That's what
It might be the most effective.
Yeah.
No,
I think
it's
that's
the
what they were
only
saying.
one. I think it's really the only one.
That's what the
Before we blow
conservation.
up the world about this, I'd like to, have to find something to put in its place. Okay? No, you just can't, we're not using that much to start with from what I read, and it's being used properly by proper people.
Correct.
So before we
What,
stop, so to speak, this, we got to find a different way to do it. If we don't find it, I don't see it as a big problem right now, myself. After reading the Canada and, but there's, if Roundup gets stopped, then I'm pretty sure they'll invent something else. But until they do, what little we use, we still need to use. That's only my opinion, but I don't see any other way at the moment.
Is there anything else that's somewhat effective on poison ivy?
I'm a licensed applicator, and I've used other products. The one that sticks in my mind is triclopyr is the active ingredient, but I really don't know enough about the products beyond, at the time of application, reading the labels.
Is that still a direct application when you used it?
Yes,
Yeah.
but it will not kill monocots or grasses. It's only, as I remember, it's only effective on things with secondary growth, woody stems.
Yeah.
So, the cut and swipe method
Cut and swipe.
was traditionally used most, but.
The other thing, too, that kind of came to my mind is that we have been annually, I guess, talking about the right-of-way and spraying, and it's a little bit hypocritical to be saying, well, we're still going to use it, but National Grid, you can't.
Right. And the reason, and that's a good point, and I think Poker had mentioned that also. The question is on the right-of-way spraying, you know, when they use Roundup, that's all, and it's state-regulated, Department of Agriculture. It's a licensed EPA, state-licensed product,
Yeah.
so it is allowed to be used on the right-of-way, so that's why it's used, even though the Board of Health in town has expressed our concerns for that, being over the, you know, drinking water aquifer and so forth. Has expressed that for a number of years. It still goes forward with that state approval. So the amount that they use on the right-of-ways, and we probably have homeowners using maybe more than this than what the town uses.
I was going to say, I'm
Right.
sure.
Oh, yeah.
I know my
Right.
husband uses it.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I know.
That means my industrial spray is still okay, huh?
But you'll stop that, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, with the town uses so little of it, that's the question. And I think that the responses that you saw from each of the various departments, that besides using so little, they found it the most effective, and they've tried to cut back their use also. I guess the flip side is, you know, is they would have to look at whether it's more hand cutting or a different alternative, or it might be more costly.
I assume
So
it would
what's
be
the cost risk
I
benefit
think it
again?
would be
Yes.
more costly.
Yes.
Right. Pretty hard to.
Are there any other towns that have banned it, Bruce?
I believe Chatham has their selectmen banned it and forwarded to the Board of Health to write a policy. And I'm not,
Come up with any
no,
alternatives?
no, they haven't started. Checked with Brewster, they're saying from their first review of their departments, they did not believe any of the departments were using it now.
At all?
At all. So I'm not sure, and Barnstable wasn't clear on when I talked to them how much was being used.
Well, that's a big area.
Yeah. So it's still unfolding the Cape Wide. I mean, Poker is visiting several of the towns. I know they're going to Barnstable in a couple weeks, and they're making their way across the Cape, so I don't really have a good feel of how many towns have banned it or, you know, just limited use.
Let me look into that. Yeah, I have no idea what the rest of the state or Cape, other towns.
Yeah.
Any other comments, anyone? So, people want to wait? Want to vote?
I'd just soon take a vote now.
Anyone else?
I think I would benefit from holding off and being able to read a little more personally, if that's...
Okay. As a new member, I'll support you on that then. Absolutely. Anyone else? Waiting or not waiting?
Our next board meeting would be February 11th,
Yeah.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
I think we should wait then.
Okay, so we're going to wait
I'd be
then.
curious to know what Brewster's doing. I mean, you're
Well,
saying
they-
Brewster
Right.
doesn't use it at all.
They say they don't use it at all, so when I asked,
Do they not have any of these in poison ivy? Or
They don't
bitters?
have any of
They
that
don't
stuff.
have any in Brewster?
They pay higher taxes there, so.
Oh, well, they do. That's true.
Okay. We're waiting. We'll put it on the agenda for the next meeting then. Good. All right. 6 items. Discussion on tobacco, and what's listed is vaping and then flavored tobacco, menthol, mint, and wintergreen. Director Murphy, so what are we doing tonight with this?
well, per the board's request, the board had wished to have a little discussion on vaping e-cigarettes. We've had inquiries from the schools that they've seen an increase at the schools of vaping and e-cigarettes. And flavored tobacco, right now, menthol, mint, and wintergreen are not included in our tobacco regulations. Some towns now have recently moved forward to include menthol, mint, and wintergreen as restricted, those being Somerville, Ashland, and Needham. This is all recent. Ashland was last week, and even the other two were about a month ago. So they're moving forward with that, and then Somerville moves forward with restricting the sale of the location of vaping e-cigarette products themselves to adult age 21 stores only that do not have a food service license. or a retail store license. So the board wanted to discuss that a little bit more. I have talked to each of the 3 towns between either myself or Phil. We have a copy of the regulations that you have and Somerville in there, if we wish to go that way. So it's just on tonight, just for a discussion, whether the board wants to put it on for another meeting to look at some tentative regulations to go forward to prohibit it. As of now, those 3 towns have not been challenged by the tobacco industry. I'm sure they might get a considerations to a challenge. I know our Board of Health here has been challenged over flavored tobacco by Cumberland Farms. The board did win that first case, and it's under appeal right now to the state court. So, there's some options out there. I think the increase of vaping is a national problem. It's just not a Yarmouth or a state problem. I did talk to a person in the Attorney General's office Friday, and they're trying to look at regulations to control or prohibit the sale of vaping products and sale of tobacco online being delivered. So they're looking at trying to strengthen Massachusetts regulations that way. So I think you see, and I've heard other towns are starting to have the discussion on increasing the flavored and addressing vaping. So I think this is kind of the new things boards of health are looking at, and I would say probably over the last month. And from my conversations with the state, I believe a couple other towns will be starting discussions what they might want to do for possible regulations on vaping or increasing flavored tobacco. Right now, for the people at home that are listening, that we are an age 21 community. We had done that a while ago. We had prohibited the other type of flavors several years ago, being the first town to state to do that. And we do have a cap on the number of retail licenses in town. So the board's been very proactive on the tobacco front.
Wasn't Needham the first town in the state to change the limit, the age limit? I think they were like the first one to do.
They might have been.
Yeah.
I mean, the vaping is sort of an epidemic. It's just, but it's with young people. It's what's taken place, like increased 75%. We're talking about 18-year-olds and under. So, and these aren't people who are vaping to stop smoking cigarettes totally. I mean, it's a cool thing to do. It's obviously it's not helping on any nicotine front in sense of maybe it's even increasing dependency, but they're not buying those products in our stores here. I mean, that's a lot of these are being bought online for sure. It's easy enough to go online and purchase it.
Correct. I mean, you have the article in the paper, Cape Cod Times, that had schools tackle vaping blitz, where they talked about the vaping issues in several schools across the Cape. And then there was a news article that I also put in the board's packet, addicted to vapid nicotine, teenagers have no clear path to quitting. So I think you're correct. I mean, I think the state had made quite progress in having a decrease in cigarettes among high school children, and now I think you're hearing on the some of the ads saying, if you want to quit smoking, start juuling, and it's a kind of a cross message for people out there. And I think a lot of the youths don't understand that it's just as addicted. And they think that they'll still say in some of the responses that they know not to smoke cigarettes, that's bad for you, but they haven't translated that over to e-cigarettes and juuling. So we're seeing all the progress that's been made throughout the country and the state has now going back up on the e-cigarettes and juuling.
I don't know, are the restrictions on percentage of nicotine in the products different? In other words, cigarettes versus the e-cigarettes? Because I was reading about it, it sounds like the nicotine level is much higher in some of the brands.
Yes, I think we looked at one of the Juul products that was higher. Yes, one of the pods of Juul, yeah.
I mean, part of the issue with the e-cigarettes is it's new. Long-term effects, you don't really know. Certainly there's not tar in it, which is which is positive. But
There's other chemicals
if
sometimes.
formaldehyde is in some of them. It's the article I sent in to Bruce from Dana-Farber was just about that, some of the chemicals that are in unknown, what will happen based upon that. And you singled out the menthol, mint, and wintergreen. So there's history on that was a separate set of flavors? Is that essentially
Yeah, I
how
think-
that came about?
Right. I think when the tobacco regulations came out several years ago, the state was looking at more flavors that were like strawberry and mango, flower, blueberry and things like that, and they weren't going after at that point in time those type of. But now, some boards are starting to look at that.
I don't see that they're any different from the flavors that we've already.
Well, and under our definition, it does have a distinctive characteristic
Right.
aroma or flavor.
Right.
So it could be considered under our regulation. It's not on the MHAB list, though, which our regulation says we only prohibit.
Well, it doesn't say we only use that.
Yeah.
It says we use it.
Right, we use it to
Yeah.
make decisions? Is
Right.
that how it
Yeah.
ended up, the
It
final
doesn't say
regulations?
exclusively that, I don't
Right.
believe.
I'd have to check. I don't think it's restricted, we can use it, though.
Right.
Right? If it's on the list, and that's something, it's the only way a store owner would know is by checking the list.
And how do we work with the store owners to know? Because they have so many different types of
Right.
salespeople saying, well, just buy this product because it's named 5 or it's called black and you can sell it. Well, it happens to be on the MHAB list. If they don't have a list to work with, it's going to be difficult for us and the retail stores. However, MHAB, the Mass Association of Health Boards, it appears is not going to be keeping that list current. So they're saying boards of health shouldn't be relying on that list only. They should be making their own determination on characteristic flavored, which would then be difficult if we didn't have a list to go by. We would have to be going into the store and open up, almost every pack and making a determination.
Yeah.
So it's be
Complicated.
complicated for towns and boards
Difficult
and
for store
retailers.
owners, yeah.
Yeah, the poor
what to
store
be on
owner.
a shelf.
Why is the reason? Money?
No, I think they're trying to. I think some of the questions brought up is, the method of
Determining?
determination and how scientific it is.
Right, too
I
subjective.
think MHAB still feels they have a good method of making that determination, and a lot of that is either through sales promotion or the product promotion where they say it is a flavored. So they've used that for determination on the list on many of them. So it's just hard to keep that up, and I think it's also staffing also, possibly.
Hey, new products are going to come out, they're not on the list, so, the town has no way to know, really.
Right.
Store owners.
No,
how are they gonna know?
or the store owners, yeah.
That?
Or the retail
It's not
store
fair to the
owners.
store owners.
Well, particularly when the tobacco companies mislead in their advertising about whether or not it's flavored.
That certainly was the case with Cumberland Farms, right?
Well, right, with the products that,
So tonight, we're just deciding whether we want to talk about it in the future.
I
It's
think
really-
so.
We're
I'd
already
like to-
talking about
I mean-
it.
I'd like to talk about it some more,
So
sure.
put it on the agenda, we can
So we
talk
can
more
put it
about
on the agenda for the 11th. I can draft up, you have a draft regulation on, based on Somerville's.
Right.
So they're one of the towns who actually did this, then?
Yes. So, I mean, we could use, regulations from towns that have gone forward. I have asked our town attorney to look at Ashland, the Board of Health that went forward last week, and they're the same town council for both them and Yarmouth. So we're going to have some discussion on that. So I think at that time, you put it on for February 11th as a draft, and if the board's comfortable with that draft or wants to make another draft, is fine. But once let's say a working draft is available, then you would hold a public hearing for the public and retail stores to come in and comment on.
Right.
That's been the progress in the past, the
Process,
boards.
Comments from anyone on the board? Anyone who's be helpful for people who have commented and for the director. Anyone?
Will there be a chance for public comment on this issue? I'm sorry to interrupt.
I don't think we're going to do that tonight. By the way, you won't be heard because you're not at a mic, just so you know that for the public. So I don't think we're going to start tonight. But let's put it on, and I guess certainly...
Written comments can be submitted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Between now and the date of the February 11th date of the
Mm-hmm.
hearing.
Yeah, I encourage anyone to write in, or anyone who's listening to certainly write in. I mean, we need input.
For or against.
Yeah, and just to educate us, figure out what to do about this.
We do have some retail people sitting in the audience. I did recognize, I don't know your name, sir, but I know we do have other retail people that I am familiar with that are showing some interest. I haven't heard from them individually, but I know they're here tonight.
Well, that's essential. All right, so put it on the agenda. Charlie, you're okay with that? Just for next meeting? We'll just talk about it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. All right.
So it won't be a hearing next meeting, it's just going
No.
to be our more discussion.
More discussion to try to come up with if you want to go forward with a draft regulation.
Right.
I hope to have some more information from probably those 3 towns to firm up a little something for the board to discuss.
Okay?
And they should just keep
And
going.
if there are people listening or people who are present here tonight, just, contact the health department, okay?
Yeah, any comments that we should probably get like by February 7th or so we can have them ahead of time, so we can pass them out to the board if you wish to submit something.
Yeah, board members get packets ahead of meetings and just want to hear back from people. And I encourage people who are listening to look into it themselves and see what's going on in the state. Okay. Okay, number 7 here. Update on wastewater planning is the next item on the agenda.
That's Charlie.
That's Charlie. Great.
Yeah. I went to, the last meeting I went to, the doors were locked, so I went home. But I did go to the one that, about a month ago upstairs, and what they're thinking of doing is huge. And the thing that strikes me, being a businessman and being here most of my life, except a couple of years, is I don't know if the people and taxpayers in the town of Yarmouth can afford this. I really don't know.
What are they thinking of doing, Charlie?
Well, they want to do in 7 stages, put centralized sewage in the town of Yarmouth.
Over a period of how many years? It's decades, right?
But looking at 5 or 10.
I
Decades.
thought it was longer than that.
Yeah.
I did go to a public meeting a year or so ago to hear about it.
Like 20 years, 25 years?
Oh, more. To pay
Realize
this
30
off and all?
years.
It's like 80 years or something? It's really spread out.
It's a long,
It'll be your kid's
What I
problem.
can- what I can tell you from the start
your daughter.
My daughter's daughter,
is
baby.
whether you get it in your house now or 20 years from now, you start paying for it now.
For the town part, not for you to hook up. The people who don't, right, the houses would have to pay right then if they're getting hooked up to a main
Whether
line.
you're hooked up or not. Say they just do the first stage is Route 28, okay? Everybody in town is going to start paying.
So the whole tax rate will go up. for
Yeah.
The whole
everybody.
tax rate goes up.
Right, because
Yeah.
we're all financed.
I just meant the individual hookup, not for the whole system. Yeah.
So I was looking at the tax rate for that for the next 20 years, all right, combined with what else comes along. I don't know if the town can afford this. That's what I'm looking at, long-term effect. I don't know what anybody else pays in this town for taxes, but I'm upwards of $9,000 a year right now. Okay? So, and that's going to add on basically $3,000 a year, whether I'm hooked up or not. Okay? for the next 20 years. Plus whatever else the town thinks of, between the schools, fire department, highway department, all the rest of the crap they throw in there. In the next 20 years, you're going to put everybody in this town underwater. That's what I'm looking at.
Underwater. But truthfully, I mean,
Literally.
the waste management is the biggest issue that we face, Cape-wide, and certainly here in Yarmouth. I mean, there are certainly, you're right, the other municipal services are going to come up, but this is the big underlying issue for the Cape, I believe.
Oh, I understand.
Yeah. So how many people are on this committee?
I think it's 12.
12? Okay. And you're from the Board of Health, and who else is
I
represented?
don't know, I didn't keep score. I just listened.
Oh, okay.
Conservation Planning Board.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so
Public.
and there's some public
Yes.
at-large members?
Yes.
Okay.
DPW.
And who runs the meeting?
Pardon?
Who runs the meeting? Who? Leads the meeting.
Public. There's,
Used to be the selectman.
Yeah, Kurt
Chris,
Sears
Chris,
is
yeah.
the
Okay.
chair, and
Okay,
I think the primary contact for in-house town employees, Jeff Colby.
Right.
okay.
Kurt Sears is the past selectman.
And they meet monthly?
They pen?
They meet monthly?
They
monthly?
we were meeting every 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
When I went the other day, door was locked, so I went home.
They cancel the meeting and not tell
I don't
you?
know what they did.
I think they might have
It's-
relocated it.
It said on the note out front here that it was relocated to 261 White's Path. When I got there, all the doors were locked.
Huh.
So,
And I think you have, your committee has a meeting with the Board of Selectmen tomorrow night? You're on the agenda,
I
your
don't know.
committee?
Tomorrow night?
Yeah,
Okay.
so
What time will that be? Never mind.
yeah, I don't have their agenda in front of me. Do you remember, Amy?
I don't,
We can let you know afterwards.
But it'll be here tomorrow night?
Yes,
Not in this room, but I mean, ittle be in this building.
it will be right here in this room.
Okay,
it's a
all right.
yeah, presentation to the
It's a
select.
presentation from the committee to the board.
Oh, okay.
And then I think after that, they're going to go to public outreach meetings to discuss this proposal. I think they're talking about, the whole proposal would be about 400 million over
Yeah.
that number of years. And that's increased from the last time the voters looked at it. I think we're,
2007.
yeah, it was about 350 million plus, so,
It's going to get more expensive, too, if we
Yes.
just keep looking. Yeah.
yes.
Kate missed the boat. The federal government was going to pay for a lot of this. This goes back a couple decades, but
Yeah.
So far, they haven't seen much cooperation in that direction, last I heard, so. Savage entertainment, I call it.
Right. All right, thanks for the update.
Thank you.
Next, approval of the minutes. That would be from the 7th, right? From the January 7th meeting. Everyone had a copy in their packet. Anyone have any corrections, additions, deletions, anything? I had sent in a couple of basic ones, not much. Anyone else? Any comments? They want to make any changes in it? No, they want to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion to approve the minutes from
Second?
January 7th.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. You can't,
I wasn't here, so.
and you can't either. It's only 3, it was a quiet meeting.
Right, so Christine
that's
say
it.
abstained because she
3
wasn't
zip.
here.
They passed. Okay, we just approved the minutes.
For-
Why don't we do something else, like new and old business?
I guess the new business would be February 11th, the next board meeting. Obviously, we'll have poker discussion, tobacco discussion, and then there's a request from the recycle committee to meet with the board to start discussing the paper cups, plastic cups, and so forth, banning the plastic and going to paper cups, and some other items.
Okay.
And they would like to meet with the board before they start their drafting a bylaw to bring to possibly the fall town meeting. similar to the procedures that they did with the
Plastic bags.
plastic bags, where they drafted a regulation and then brought it to the Board of Health. Their thought now is, as they're in the very beginning of drafting, is asking the board their comment instead of getting it all drafted up. They also hope to have a few stats that of towns that already have the regulation, even though there's several towns that have adopted it that hasn't become effective yet, though. So that's two different questions.
Styrofoam cups included in that?
Correct.
Yeah.
They would be in styrofoam cups. Styrofoam at, let's say, the supermarket where you might have your, let's say, chicken that comes on a styrofoam thing. Now they're kind of turned over to, a lot of them are cardboard or plastic now.
Right.
So that change has been coming the way. I think the styrofoam plates, and then the styrofoam cups will be the big thing.
Styrofoam is like glyphosate, right?
Pardon?
It's like glyphosate. It's-
Yes.
So ask them to send something, and if they want it read, for us to do some homework,
Yeah.
to send it to you, so you
Have
put in
your
the
materials,
packets.
any
I have it.
information?
Be a better meeting if we're educated. So
Yeah.
I have it.
Frightening,
I just didn't want to overwhelm the board with too much.
Okay,
of course.
so before they
Thank you
come
for that.
next meeting, you'll
Yes.
have it out. Good.
And I can pass that along earlier, so you don't have to wait for 3 days ahead of time.
Sure.
It's not a lot, but
Okay,
I'll forward that email
okay, good.
and hard copy to you, Charlie.
So, okay. Anyone else, old or new, anything? See, what happens now, you actually have to vote in order to be able to leave.
Would you like to make your first motion?
You make a motion to adjourn, you could say that.
Okay.
I'm going to say, would anyone make a motion to adjourn? You could say,
I move to
Adjourn.
adjourn.
is there a second?
I second.
Second, yeah.
Okay, all
We
in
all
favor, say aye. Everyone says aye, and you leave, the
Aye.
meeting's over. Thank you very much, everyone.
Aye.